Chosen ones, you were never meant to numb your gifts. You were meant to refine them. The universe didn't encode your third eye for escape, but for insight. Yet somewhere along your journey, you were handed the illusion of awakening inside a leaf wrapped in fire. You were told that expansion could be inhaled, that the divine could be fast-tracked. But the realms above know better. They remember who you were before the haze. There was a time when your dreams were encoded with precision, when your intuition didn't need enhancement. It was the enhancement. Your pineal gland was once the gateway, crystalline and alive, pulsing in rhythm with celestial tones. But like many seekers before you, the path blurred when you tried to shortcut the climb. Sacred herbs were never the enemy, but the intention behind them. That changed everything. You didn't use it like a priest in the temple. You used it like a mortal craving escape. And so the frequencies recoiled. The visions you once received with clarity became distorted. Instead of entering the throne room of truth, you wandered the hallways of hallucination. The eye did not open. It was sedated. The ancients warned of this, not in fear, but in code. They spoke of times when the veil would thin, but only for those with clean resonance. The smoke that filled your lungs muted the inner fire, and in that silence, you stopped hearing the voice. You mistook floating for rising. But the ones who truly rise, they do so without crutches. Now the cosmos leans in again. It has waited long for your breath to return to rhythm, your spine to align with fire, your gaze to pierce illusion. Not every plant is poison. Not every moment was wasted. But now, the inner temple calls you back, not high, but deep. You must unlearn what the haze whispered. You must remember how to feel without filter. The gift never left you. It simply waited. Waited for you to stop reaching for shortcuts and start stepping into sovereignty. Because when your eye opens this time, it won't be from smoke. It will be from silence. There was a time your body responded to the earth's subtle vibrations, like a tuning fork perfectly calibrated to the music of the cosmos. Every inhale you once took was designed to realign your internal compass with celestial frequencies that could guide your path. But then, as you reached for what the world called freedom, something shifted. The moment that green flame sparked and you pulled it into your lungs, something inside you stopped listening. Not because the plant was evil, but because it was misused, applied to drown out truth instead of amplify it. Your third eye, that ancient lens positioned deep in the center of your mind, once pulsed in rhythm with stars you can't name and dreams you don't remember. It dimmed each time you told yourself this was medicine, when it was really an escape hatch. Frequencies you were meant to interpret began to distort, blur, and eventually fall silent. You didn't realize that every choice was a signal. Every action, a signature. Every breath, a broadcast. The ones watching you, those who had monitored your awakening from before your birth, observed as your light bent unnaturally. They didn't intervene. They couldn't, because you had to choose. That was always the law. You mistook hallucination for revelation, mistook numbing the senses for transcending them. The cost wasn't immediate, but cumulative. You began to lose your ability to discern between noise and signal. You laughed when your dreams became absurd, not realizing they were once visions. You shrugged when your intuition became foggy, not realizing it was once a compass forged by divine geometry. And even now, you feel it, that itch beneath your skin, that subtle mourning, a knowing that something was switched off. The sounds of the ether didn't stop. They just stopped reaching you. You used to walk into a room and feel the story in the air. Now, you just feel confusion. But the frequencies didn't forget you. They've waited. They've pulsed in the background of every quiet night, hoping you'd notice their faint echo. They will return when you do. But first, something hidden must rise in you again. Something that remembers the silence before the smoke. Because just beyond the next breath you take, something ancient is beginning to whisper your name again. In deserts where silence screamed louder than wind, Yeshua walked without filter or fog, each step a prayer, each breath a frequency. And when the tempter offered escape, it was not with chains but with shortcuts, stones to bread, heavens to fall. And Yeshua refused not because the stones weren't real, but because truth doesn't bloom in the soil of bypass. He understood that creation offers medicine, not miracles, that herbs were bridges, not destinations. And when he anointed the sick, it was with intention, not intoxication. He did not need smoke to open the heavens. He opened them by becoming the stillness within. You see, you've been told the lie that expanding consciousness means escaping pain. But the Christ path was never about fleeing sensation. It was about facing it, transmuting it, and returning with clarity. When you burned the leaf, not with reverence, but with recklessness, you inverted the sacred act. You didn't approach it like the ancients around a fire with song and stillness, but like a mortal escaping boredom. So the gateway closed softly, not as punishment, but protection. The eye cannot open when the vessel is veiled with false light. You mistook the tingling for alignment, the floating for ascension, and in that mist your discernment faded. But still, Yeshua waits not with anger but patience, because he knows the prodigal soul must taste the illusion to hunger for the real. He knows the third eye cannot be forced open. It must unfold like a scroll in timing divine. And when you come back, when you stop reaching for clouds and return to the ground where roots remember your name, you will hear it again, that inner whisper, the still small voice that once guided prophets and poets alike. Yeshua once said the kingdom is within, but you tried to inhale it instead of embody it. The kingdom doesn't rise through smoke. It rises through surrender. There is still time, and the sacred plant still waits, not as an escape but an ally if approached in reverence. But for now, lay it down not forever, just long enough to remember who you were before you needed it. Because the next time your eye opens, it won't be artificial, and it won't be brief. It will be eternal, and it will see what the smoke tried to hide. And just before that clarity descends, something will test you one last time. You weren't meant to see yourself like that. Not blurred, not split, not distorted through the thick lens of smoke and illusion. But the mirror realm doesn't lie. It reflects exactly what stands before it, no matter how much you try to dress it up in incense or intentions. There was a time you entered that realm glowing, light radiating from your crown to your toes, the echoes of who you were in lifetimes past shimmering around you like an echo made of gold. But then you came again, hazed in artificial clarity, and the mirror responded. Your aura didn't vanish. It recoiled. The beings who dwell beyond the veil see everything in frequency. They recognized the difference. They saw the sudden static in your core. Your edges weren't smooth anymore. They were fractured, jagged. Your energy field, once clear and pulsing with divine geometry, now flickered as if confused. In the mirror realm, the truth can't be masked. There are no filters, no curated images, no spiritual ego to hide behind. Just the raw imprint of your soul and how you carry it. When you walked through while under the haze, you saw colors, yes. You felt things. You may have even thought you touched something divine, but what you touched was a mimic. A reflection of what you could reach, not what you were ready for. The real guardians didn't speak that night. They stood in silence, watching, waiting, letting you wander into the manufactured dream. And in that space, the mirror showed you a version of yourself that wasn't entirely yours. Something about that moment lingers, doesn't it? That subtle unease. That feeling like something slipped, like a door almost opened but didn't. That wasn't your paranoia. That was your higher self pulling you back, softly, quietly, hoping you'd notice the shift. And now, as you sit with that memory, something is stirring. The mirror hasn't forgotten you. It's waiting for your return, this time without fog, without shortcuts, without borrowed energy. The image it will show you next isn't just a reflection. It's a map. But you won't be able to read it unless you step forward fully awake. Beneath a monastery buried by sand and swallowed by silence lies a scroll written in ink made from crushed meteor dust and water pulled from a starless well. Its words were never meant for the masses. They were carved for the ones who'd one day seek truth after chasing illusions. The scroll was old when the pyramids were young. It speaks not of condemnation, but of caution. It describes a time when mortals would mistake stimulation for enlightenment and synthetic elevation for divine access. You were described not by name, but by frequency. The scroll warned of the era where sacred plants would no longer be used in circles of reverence, but alone in rooms of escape. The message was clear. When something holy is misused, it does not curse you. It simply retreats. One line on the scroll glows faintly even now, when read aloud by a soul ready to remember. The eye opens not with smoke, but with stillness wrapped in flame. Not a literal fire, but the fire of discipline, of intention, of conscious presence. That is the heat that purifies the veil between seen and unseen. When you lit up to forget, you reversed the spiral. Instead of ascending, you scattered. Instead of anchoring, you drifted. The scroll says those who walk this reversed path are not forsaken, they are paused. The guardians will not open the gate until the traveler learns stillness again. You were not wrong to search. The desire to connect is in your code. But the scroll teaches that not all who see are seeing truly. Some are only catching echoes, reflections in a warped mirror. The danger is not in the plant itself, it's in thinking the plant is the destination, rather than a doorway. And when the door is forced, it doesn't open to light. It opens to echo chambers, where lost seekers orbit illusion after illusion, thinking they've awakened. But the scroll also holds a secret, a seal that only dissolves when read by one who has laid down the smoke and picked up the silence. That seal has remained unbroken for centuries, until recently, when a pulse was felt near it again, not from a sage, not from a monk, but from someone forgotten by the temples. Someone like you. Your body isn't just flesh, it's memory. Beneath the skin, beyond the bone, lives a library made of light and pattern. Your DNA is not merely biological, it's architectural. It is the blueprint of who you were before you were born. And that blueprint was written for reception, not interference. It's why you've always felt things others didn't. Why your skin tingled when someone spoke truth. Why your dreams sometimes bled into daylight. You were designed to receive divine transmission, frequencies from realms beyond language, encoded in vibration, carried through silence. But the smoke disrupted it. Each time you inhaled under the illusion of elevation, your DNA, so finely tuned to celestial messages, tightened. Not in punishment, but protection. The signal that once streamed effortlessly became static. The strand that connected your higher self to your waking mind didn't sever, it braced. You tried to speak the language of the stars while drowning out their voices. The plant you thought would awaken you began to act like a veil. A slow fog settled over the very receptors built to translate the divine. Your ancestors used sacred smoke, yes, but they did not abuse it. They understood timing, alignment, ceremony. You did it on a Tuesday afternoon with music vibrating too loud, lights too low, and no intention beyond escape. And so, your DNA rejected what you called a ritual, because it wasn't one. There's a difference between resonance and resistance. You felt it, didn't you? The moment your body stopped responding the way it used to. The intuitive sparks dulled. The messages in your dreams turned cryptic, broken. You began to mistrust your gut because it no longer spoke in clarity. But you haven't lost anything. The strands are still there, waiting. They're ancient, indestructible, woven with frequencies older than the earth. They've simply gone silent, like a choir holding its breath until the smoke clears. And now, faintly, they flicker again. You've felt it. The tingling at your spine when you sit still. The way your hands heat when you close your eyes. These are signs of reactivation. Something in you has begun to remember the original instructions. But to access the next signal, you'll need to do something that feels unnatural in this world of noise. You'll need to be still long enough to hear the frequency that never stopped calling you. When Yeshua walked among fishermen, rebels, and doubters, he didn't hand them substances to see the kingdom. He showed them how to feel it. His words pierced through illusion, not because they were loud, but because they were true. "He who has ears, let him hear," he said, not with noise, but vibration. Because the soul doesn't awaken through shock, it awakens through recognition. And yet you sought the divine through sensation, forgetting that revelation doesn't always arrive wrapped in euphoria. There's a moment in Scripture when Yeshua retreats for 40 days, not to escape the world, but to face it without distraction. No smoke, no substance, just raw clarity. In that wilderness, he wasn't seeking visions, he was becoming one. The path he walked was one of surrender, not stimulation. And that's where you veered. You looked outward, thinking enlightenment would arrive in waves, colors, and fractals. But those things fade. What remains is what roots you to the divine when the visions vanish. When you first inhaled, you weren't wrong for seeking. The error wasn't in the act, it was in the intention. You wanted to skip the climb and float instead. But Yeshua's path was a descent before it was ever an ascent. He faced darkness, betrayal, hunger, and silence. He didn't numb them. He became the flame within them. There are seekers, and there are initiates. You've danced on the edge of both. But now, the invitation is clear. To become what Yeshua hinted at. One who walks without veil, whose eye opens not from smoke, but surrender. When he said, "The eye is the lamp of the body," he wasn't talking about psychedelic visions. He was pointing to purity, to alignment, to a lens that sees without distortion. Your lamp dimmed not because you failed, but because you tried to ignite it with the wrong fuel. Still, he waits, not on a throne, but in the quiet spaces where breath meets intention. He knows the weight of being chosen. He knows the ache of a half-opened eye. The next time you seek vision, don't light anything. Sit, listen, remember. Because if you wait long enough, you might hear the same voice he heard in the desert, and what it tells you may break everything you thought was real. There is a gate, not made of stone or wood, but of light and memory. It floats between dimensions, like a whisper suspended in silence. The gate of pineal flame. Few have seen it with waking eyes, even fewer passed through. But you were close once. You stood before it in a dream that didn't feel like a dream. The atmosphere was thick with recognition, and time bent like breath against glass. You may not remember it clearly, but your soul does. You walked toward that gate, believing you were ready. But the guardians did not open it. They vanished. Not in anger, not in judgment, only in absence. The flame behind the gate burns blue-white, a color not seen in the physical realm. It is the fire of purified perception, the light that dissolves illusion. That fire cannot mix with smoke born of misused ritual. When you approached with lungs full of fog, the guardians sensed distortion. The resonance was off. The frequency didn't match the key that unlocks access. So they withdrew, silently, not to reject you, but to protect the gate. You thought they had forsaken you. You felt the sting of abandonment. But it was your own vibration that made them leave. The gate only opens when the soul carries the code of clarity. Yours had become scrambled, still holy, but out of sync. You reached for the divine while dimming the very frequency that allowed you to cross. But that gate still stands. It never moved. The guardians didn't close it forever. They simply wait for your return in a state untouched by escape. They wait for your spine to align with breath, your thoughts to slow into stillness, your intention to rise without smoke. And when you come like that, humbled, aware, listening, the air around the gate will begin to shimmer again. You'll notice it in subtle ways first, a sudden pulse between your brows, a heat at the crown of your head, a sound like nothing you've ever heard before, yet completely familiar. These are the signs that the gate is sensing your approach again. High above the veil of known consciousness lies a chamber not mapped by satellites, nor remembered by most souls who leave it. It's called the Dome of Witness, where timelines are reviewed not in years but in frequencies. At its center sits a man cloaked in refracted light, his face familiar, though you've never seen it in waking life. He doesn't speak, he observes, not with eyes, but with awareness so vast it feels like silence wrapping around your spine. He watched you once, the night your soul floated away on artificial clouds, mistaking simulation for ascension. You didn't know you were being watched, did you? You thought you had escaped gravity. You felt the lightness and assumed it was elevation. But he watched, still and patient, as the cords connecting you to your original intention began to fray. Not break, never break. Just stretch, thin, struggle to hold the weight of misaligned desire. You were reaching for the throne of knowing with lungs full of distraction, and he knew you couldn't hold what you thought you were ready for. He sees all paths, all choices, but he doesn't interfere. His task is not to guide, but to record. Still, the night you lit that final spark and called it ritual, something in him stirred. Not disappointment, not sorrow, but memory. Because long before this incarnation, you stood before him with a promise, a vow that this time you would awaken without falling into the illusions that took you last time. He didn't speak then. He doesn't speak now. But he blinked, just once. And in that blink, a ripple echoed down your spine. You felt it. You just didn't know what it meant. The dome is made of crystal, not because it is fragile, but because it reflects. Every moment you spend chasing echoes, the dome reflects a version of you slightly more distant. Every breath you take in stillness, it draws you back. He is watching again. Something has shifted. You haven't smoked in a while, not because you were told not to, but because something inside began to remember silence. The dome shimmers now, faintly. His hands move slightly, and in that moment, your name echoes again. There was a desert where time bent, and shadows whispered truths the world wasn't ready to hear. Yeshua walked into that silence with nothing but breath and resolve. He didn't bring bread. He didn't bring drink. And he certainly didn't bring smoke to soften the edges of his mind. He fasted not for approval, but for alignment. For 40 days, he resisted the seduction of shortcuts. Because he knew truth isn't heard when the mind is loud. It's heard when the soul is still. You tried to hear what he heard, but you brought a flame of your own. You thought the green leaf would unlock what the silence would not. You burned it with hope, with frustration, with longing. And for a moment, your thoughts expanded. The colors shimmered. The veil felt thinner. But you didn't touch truth. You touched the echo of desire. You heard voices, but not the voice. You saw visions, but not the vision that transcends the mind. And in the morning, you didn't remember the message, just the feeling. Yeshua could have turned stones into bread. He could have called down legions of light to bypass the wilderness. But he knew that wisdom grows only in absence, that the divine reveals itself not in altered states, but in surrendered ones. His clarity came not through addition, but subtraction. There's a power in fasting, not just from food, but from noise, from chemicals, from stimulation. You thought you were opening the third eye, but you were flooding the temple with smoke and hoping to find the altar. Yeshua entered the temple with nothing but breath, and the heavens answered. He once said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Not the tripped, not the floating, the pure, the grounded, the ones willing to wait through eons until eternity speaks. You are not forsaken. But you are being refined. The frequency is returning, but only if you return to stillness. You once sought heaven in a cloud. Now, heaven seeks you in your breath. It was late, but not in the way clocks define it. The hour bent, reality thinned, and you felt the air change. Subtle, electric, heavy with something unnamed. You weren't asleep, not fully awake either. Somewhere between breath and drift, you hovered. And in that space, something ancient began to move. You felt it, not with your fingers, but with your spine. A pulse, a pull, as if the very center of your forehead was remembering how to see. The veil had started to lift. The symbols danced, not imagined, but remembered. Patterns, glyphs, fragments of something older than language began arranging themselves in front of you like a cosmic alphabet you were once fluent in. The hum in your ears wasn't noise. It was the beginning of the voice. Not the one you used to speak, but the one you used to know. You had arrived at the threshold. But something else lingered in the corner of your awareness. A dull weight. A residue. You had smoked earlier, not much, but enough. You told yourself it was to relax, to connect, to heighten. But now, in this thin place, the substance hung in the air like static. The clarity that had begun to crystallize flickered. The glyphs shifted. The hum distorted. You reached out in your mind to grasp what was coming through, and it slipped like water through fingers made of fog. And just like that, the door didn't close. It paused. You turned over. You blinked. The moment was gone. In the morning, you remembered you had felt something, but not what it was. Just a whisper of almost. The eye had stirred, but not fully opened. And the worst part wasn't the loss. It was not knowing why. You carried that moment without language, like a melody you once knew, stuck just beneath recall. You kept chasing it with rituals and flame, but it never returned the same way. Because the eye doesn't open through effort. It opens through alignment. And that night, you were nearly there. Now, it circles back again. The pulse returns. The door hums. But this time, you must decide.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.